We are live.
Oh, all right, everybody. I'm excited that you're here. Got Yogi. Say hi.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Well, this is our second one. We're trying to do this weekly, and busy schedules and 6-hour time zones does make it hard. So thanks for bearing with us. But if you have any suggestions or anything you want us to cover, by all means, comment. Please do it live, and let's get a healthy conversation in here. You can butt in at any time, and we'll try to get to it. What do you think, Yogi?
Yeah, definitely. We want to have as much interaction as possible. Gives us something to know where to go with next time, and gives us something to talk about while we're here. So yeah, definitely, we want as much interaction from everybody as possible. So, you got any questions or any comments? Yeah, put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to dive into suspensories injuries this week. And but before we do, I guess I would like to say one thing. So we're going to do a couple more of these, and then we're going to start doing these on our subscriber onlys on our individual Facebooks. So if you like it, follow along, and we'd love to have you. So let's get going on the suspensories. Yogi, what do you say?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So what have you experienced in your practice with suspensories then?
So I feel like this is a great topic because it's kind of like all the sales ads that you see on TV for, like this thing cures cancer or weight loss or whatever, and then the side effects might be all of these terrible things, And I kind of think that's the way the suspensory is because it's so dynamic. I mean, in definition, its job is to suspend the fetlock, right? Keep it from dropping. And the racehorse industry that you're in and a lot of other people are in has proved that the suspensory apparatus as a whole is a slingshot effect and absolutely retains energy and helps propel the horses forward and faster. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean the suspensory's got a job to do. I can crack on actually and um, share a couple of slides here. So we know that the suspensory, as you just said, the suspensory's main job is to stop the overextension of the fetlock. That is the main job of the suspensory, and we know that the injury can be sudden overload, but normally it's repetitive micro damage. And
Meaning like the straw that broke the camel's back, like it wasn't a catastrophic injury. Typically it's like a little bit of strain, right?
exactly. So, and this is the thing. I don't know. I think you'll probably agree with this. I think actually we can talk about the farriery aspects of it, but I think surfaces play a huge role in this. Would you agree with that?
I would. And actually, oh man, I just got back from the summit. Who teaches Kentucky Horseshoeing School?
I don't know.
Oh man, I feel so bad. But he did a whole presentation on how toe grabs, flat shoes, and barefoot affect the suspensory. And
Right.
the take home message was footing and how the toe grab
Somebody's
rapidly.
put Mitch.
Yeah, Mitch Taylor.
There
Thank
you go.
you, Ben. I'm sorry, Mitch. He's a buddy man too. That was terrible. But point is that I said, what's more important? Is it the toe grab or is it the sinking at the toe? And he said yes. So ultimately, the toe grab rapidly deaccelerates the foot and then makes the horse dive into the footing. And he showed that on his slides. It was so awesome.
Yeah, and we also know from research that like dressage horses have a disproportionate amount of suspensory issues, and that's because they're working constantly on soft surfaces. And the thing is we think of soft surfaces being protective, but actually, well, and I'm sure you felt it running. If you run along the road versus you run along the beach, a sand beach,
Right?
you have to work a lot harder. All of your soft tissues are working harder. So yes, on the hard ground we have protection against concussive issues, but actually on the soft surface we do end up with a big predisposition to a lot of soft tissue injuries because of working on the soft. So I certainly know that I get a lot more injuries, suspensory injuries, in my horses that are working on surfaces. And surfaces is something that we can't really control, but we can control, putting appropriate shoes on. So, I mean, that if you want to keep a foot floated on top of a surface, take that surface into account, then obviously we want wider sections and these kind of things. Would you agree with that?
I would, like in the rodeo industry, every time it doesn't really matter the event, but it's typically soft footing and way softer than dressage, and usually a little softer than the racetrack, really, honestly. So it is hands down the number one injury in the performance horse world in my Western
Yeah.
industry,
Yeah.
and it's weird how it doesn't specify. You'll get front, hind, like just random. Like we
Yeah.
even had we have this very big rodeo account, and they had random suspensory issues, and the vet dived all into it and was checking all the boxes, and they decided that it was the drag, because the drag was creating grooves in the ground underneath, and while it looked good on top, underneath at the base layer it had ridges in it, and he blamed the constant changes in it. So whether
That's
that's true
very
or not,
interesting.
whether
Yeah.
that's not true or not is whatever, but
Well,
it's
we do we do know from this. So I've put a Hobbs et al. Here. There's a Hobbs et al. White paper that talks about surfaces, and one of the things that she talks about is inconsistency. So if you have inconsistencies in the surface, and I know from my polo horses that if what they're training on the every day during the week is hugely different from what they play on a weekend or whatever,
Mhm.
it does massively predispose them to soft tissue injuries and suspensory injuries. And suspensory is one of the biggest problems that we have with the polo horses. And last year, I was talking with one of the vets, and she said it was because they were training on a hard track, and then the ground was really soft that they were playing on, and so their suspensories and soft tissues weren't able to condition themselves under the training to actually cope with the surface that they were actually playing on. So that's a really important thing. I think is we have to understand as farriers, a lot of this is outside of our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that self-reflection is always key, but at the end of the day, I was even talking to Steve Kraus at the summit, who loved that man, but he was talking about polo horses, how it was in their industry as well, like you just said. But I was trying to pick his brain on what he thought about that, and he said, I think it's in every industry. So
Yeah, 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 definitely. I mean, we're asking our horses to work hard at the end of the day, and if their job is to reduce this, and this is something that we're demanding of them during their work, then it's not something that they would be doing as often as they do with us in the wild. So it's we're asking these tissues to take a lot more. We also know from research that the suspensory ligament is maximally loaded at mid stance as well. So um, why don't you take us through? Have you got any cases or anything you wanted to talk about?
yeah, I've got a few cases that I'd love to talk about, but why don't you finish talking about how you're at mid stance and finish this stride phase
Okay.
conversation right here?
Yeah. So we know that the suspensory is maximally loaded at mid stance, and we know.
Which one is
Um,
that in your diagram?
okay. So this is the stance phase, right? So this is the load that is going through the foot during the stance phase.
So you're talking about the center one is the stance phase.
The red one is the stance phase from landing
Yeah,
all the way up to mid stance when there's the maximum amount of load, and
right,
then reduces as you go through to break over to the right. Okay, so right smack bang in the middle, whether you have the middle line at 2,
right,
that is the exact middle of the stance phase. That's when you're
right.
at mid stance. Okay, and there's a superficial digital flex tendon. It has maximum strain just before mid stance. Suspensory ligament has maximum strain bang on mid stance. and the DDFT has maximum strain just after mid stance.
Okay, well, so you said the superficial flexor tendon is just before mid stance, the suspensory is mid stance, and the deep flexor is just after mid stance. Why don't you explain why?
Okay, so this is taken from a study called Takahashi et al. Okay, 2014. It's the most up to date model that measures the strains within these different structures during mid stance. And the hypothesis, or I can't remember if it's actually in the paper, but my hypothesis for the highest SDFT strain being just before mid stance is because the SDFT is responsible for absorbing the rapid descent of the limb. And then suspensory ligament is in charge of the maximum descent, if that makes sense. And then the DDFT is recruited along with the suspensory ligament just after maximum load at mid start. So that's kind of in simple terms. So if you think about as the limb is being loaded, you have a high rate of increase of load, and that's that's the superficial digital flex tendon's job to counteract that. When you get to the maximum mid stance, the suspensory ligament is holding that fetlock up, and then as you just get past that, the DDFT joins in with the suspensory ligament to just absorb that last bit of load. Hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So we know that a suspensory ligament is maximally loaded at mid stance. So if the suspensory ligament is maximally loaded at mid stance, then our job as farriers has got to be keeping that point mid stance within a physiological norm. So keeping that ligament within its elastic capacity so it doesn't fail. So that's our job as farriers. Having said that, we also know that this broken forward hoof pass and axis also increases suspensory strain, right? So we have two different aspects of suspensory strain. We have the how far the fetlock drops, okay, and we have the pitch of the foot. The two different aspects of suspensory strain. Now we know that injury occurs when the mechanical load exceeds the tissue tolerance, right? So when the job that the structure is asked to do, if the load exceeds its ability to do that job, then that's when failure happens. So our job, like I said, is to keep mechanical loads within physiological norms, right? So that means to keep them manageable for the structures.
That's where conformation plays a game.
Conformation, but also we have to understand the hoof ground interaction and how to manipulate that to make sure that lever arms aren't too long and that the pitch of the foot is correct. It comes back a little bit to what we were talking about last week, really, about those kind of biomechanics.
Exactly. Just like we were talking originally, like with Mitch, where if you were to shoe that horse with a really short toe and have lots of support out the back, you're going to make the toe dive in turn causing suspensory issues.
Right, exactly. So this is where we have to think about different surfaces and the two different factors, right? Because the slide's been a little bit messed up there, but never mind. We have opposite interventions for these two things as well, right? That's what's important. So the thing is with suspensory is unless you understand what surface you're working on and what's caused the strain in the first place, you can just get asked to put a suspensory shoe on. You just get asked to put a suspensory shoe on. What you actually need to know is, what are we trying to stop here? Are we trying to stop hyperextension of the fetlock, or are we trying to stop the toe from sinking into the soft ground? And the two things have opposite interventions. That's the problem, right? The problem is that the shoe on the left, which I've put on a polo pony, this shoe has got a wide toe to stop that toe from sinking into the floor. But this chap on the right, this chap's only working on hard surfaces. And the job of the egg bar is to reduce the descent of the fetlock. So this is the problem with the some of the treatment of suspensories, is we're not actually given a mechanism that the vet wants us to address. They just say suspensory. What have you found with that?
This is the whole thing right here. I feel like earlier in my career, you say suspensory, I say suspensory shoe. So what is can you show one of my suspensory shoes?
Yeah, sure.
So a suspensory shoe is designed to leave the toe on top of the ground and for the heels to sink into the ground. So just like you saw on Yogi's shoe right there with the wide toe, the goal is to find a way to keep the toe on top of the ground. So I think like we dealt with that a lot on cutting horses when we were doing a lot of those. And you have to think about what they're in. You know, they're in very, very deep ground. So, you know, that's probably going to play a pretty big role, where that suspensory shoe on hard ground, I don't think it's really going to do much. Do you?
Well, no, that's the point. The point is that on hard ground, the wide toe does absolutely nothing. So, and that's the point here, really, because like, so here I've got an example of a horse that had, you can see the surgery it had here. And the vet said to me, Yogi, I don't want this fetlock to drop at all. Okay, I need it to stay bolt upright so that this injury can heal. You can see what the vet's done over here with all these bolts and everything. So I put on this this really long egg bar to stop any kind of fetlock descent.
Right.
And that was successful, because what extension at the back does is it acts like a cantilever. Okay, so it's a bit like these chairs. I've always, when I was little, I always used to wonder, how the hell does that chair not collapse at the back, right? And this is the same thing that's happening in the horse, right? We have a cantilever effect. So when you have extra caudal shoe length, it reduces the fetlock descent because it acts as a cantilevered extension. So this is mechanics. This is like architectural mechanics at work here. And it happens because it shifts the center of pressure rearward, which we're going to talk about a little bit, what that does on the soft, affecting, reducing the elastic. I can't see my own writing because of the thing. Anyway, basically what it does is it absorbs some of the bending forces with that cantilever, right? So if we look at it here, right, we look at the foot on the left, we have a shoe that means that the ground reaction force is going through this arrow here, the arrow that goes into the hoof, and that creates a distance to where the fetlock is dropping of the yellow arrow.
Okay.
Right. When we add length, we have the cantilever effect, but we've also moved where the ground reaction force acts through the foot backwards as well. So then the distance from that ground reaction force to where the limb is descending is shortened, which is the green arrow, right?
Right.
So when we put on these shoes with all this extra length, there's two effects. One is a cantilever effect, which stops that descent because it through those mechanics that I talked about, and the other is that we physically reduce the moment arm to the fetlock as well. So it does two things. So cantilever plus increased caudal surface area plus a shorter moment arm equals reduced fetlock drop and equals reduced suspensory strain. But the problem is, if you look at the ground reaction forces that I've done with the red arrows, when you do that, you're going to change the pitch of the foot on the soft, right?
Right.
So if we put an egg bar on the soft, we end up creating the forward pitch of the foot, right? So the problem is that this is where it comes back to, if we're dealing with a suspensory injury, you need to know what surface are we working on, Mr. Vet, because otherwise the shoe that you're going to ask me to put on is not gonna work. Jamie's asked, why would you want to stop the toe from sinking in? Why do you want to stop the toe from sinking in, Lee?
So the suspensory, I always say that God had a good plan when he built the horse. And so everything kind of counteracts itself. So the deep flexor is designed, we're always trying to have a positive angle to help the deep flexor, right? And the superficial digital flexor tendon is also likes a positive angle, correct?
Yes.
So the suspensory, that starts at the base of the knee or the base of the hock, comes down, connects at the sesamoids, bifurcates or splits, and then goes down to the pasterns. So I think talking about, we have to talk about the job of the suspensory before you can really answer that, because the suspensory is so dynamic, and it is, the attachment at the sesamoids is so strong that they're almost two different bears, really. And I feel like the majority of the injuries I see are high suspensory strains. And I feel like we're going to get plumb into the weeds on this, but I feel like it's all a balancing act, Jamie. I feel like if you rob Peter to pay Paul, everybody goes broke. And I feel like just adequate amount of sinking in the ground is good. And you just don't want excessive anything, in short. Would you agree, Yogi?
Yeah, and I think that the easiest way to probably explain it to Jamie is if I go back to this. Okay, so we there's two things that strain the suspensory. One of them is the the downward collapse of the limb. Okay, that puts strain on the suspensory. But the other thing that strains the suspensory is if the foot is broken forward. Okay, and if you look at this, you can actually see the branches of the suspensory that's popping right out, can't you? You can see that.
Looks like it's flexing right now. If you can
right,
see
exactly, exactly. That's the suspensory popping out of there. So when we're on a soft surface, we don't want the toe sinking in because it's going to create that. It's going to create that pop, that extra strain in the suspensory ligament, in the branch of the suspensory ligament, and well, the whole thing. But as you can see it in that picture in the branch.
Wouldn't it also be important to talk about every time you're raising the angle of the hoof too, just in a 2D, just like in an X-ray, you are dropping fetlock?
Absolutely. I think the thing is with the share, the load share between the three structures, between the deep digital flexor, the superficial, and the suspensory, it's all about having the physiological normal alignment for that horse, right? So if you raise the heels too much and you tip the foot forward, then you're going to overload the suspensory just statically. So yeah, it's all about having everything correct. So and then if you obviously if you have a broken back, too much of a broken back hoof pastanaxis, then you put strain on the deep and the superficial. So this is why I'm yet to be persuaded away from phalangeal alignment within a working tolerance being optimal. There's lots of people who would like to say, oh, all horses have different hoof pastanaxes. Well, actually, in my experience, if you get rid of all of the collapses and distortions and all those kind of things, you usually end up with a horse with a reasonably straight hoof pastanaxis. I don't know what you think to that.
Oh man, yeah, they're making us get to the point quicker, and that's probably good, I guess. But Levi's got a great question, and Laszlo's got a great question as well. Ultimately, Levi's asking when you're shoeing with an egg bar to help heal a suspensory issue, how long is that sustainable until you run into a caudal hoof issue? And then Laszlo, sorry if I said your name wrong. Yogi probably should have taken that one. I love what you guys have been posting. Did you guys ever check into composite shoes? I've been using them on suspensory shoes. and had very good success maintain or after surgeries. So what I would say to all of that, and what I said at the beginning is what I used to do is you say suspensory, I say suspensory shoe. Why? Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Well, I'm going through my therapeutic exam right now, and I'm studying with Heather Beauchamp right now, and I was just at 5-Star Horseshoeing School studying with Remington and Dusty. And the more people I talk to, the farther I dive into this, the more I kind of take a step back from that suspensory shoe. Unless I think you need to have a healthy conversation with the vet. Hopefully they know what they're doing, and the footing. But my number one concern on any of those questions is that what does the foot need? Because I have seen those suspensory shoes just destroy heels. And that's why I say that it's like the advertisements that say this is going to, you're going to lose all this weight, but it didn't talk about all of these, you might die from this, or you might wish you to die from this side effects. And I feel like that's what happens when you start manipulating things in an unhealthy way. So I feel like I've seen, I don't know about you, Yogi, but I feel like I've seen, especially on the hind end on suspensories, you'll see negative plantar angles and or heel failure. So the last thing you ever want to do on heel failure is crush it more. So I don't know. I feel like fix the problem. And this is we're very close to the home, because my wife's great horse, Amy, fell down at a rodeo and strained her suspensory and broke her hock. Well, the thing is that was a catastrophic injury, but all I did is leave her barefoot. I kept her at a good angle, and I let the vet do his job with his regenerative therapy and shockwave and trying to heal that ligament. So when I get backed into a corner, I just put the foot where it should be. In a situation like that, the only sidebar on that would be like severed tendons and stuff, like the deep flexor where you got to get them up and rest them. What do you think, Yogi?
Well, so Tom Trosin's commented, he said, it isn't the shoes, it's the application. Now, there is a certain truth to that, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. But also, it comes back to this you can't just put a suspensory shoe on. You need to know what surface you're working on, how long you're going to be doing that. You need to assess the balance as well. So the reason this is supposed to work is because pressure equals force over area, right? So we increased the area, we reduced the force. So it's supposed to keep the foot from sinking into the thing. But if we look at some studies, Hagen studies, these are studies from Hagen, it showed this is coming back to the different surfaces, right? And suspensory. So on penetrable ground, the bar shoes cause a steeper palmar angle, right? They cause the foot to tip into the ground. Okay. So the question is, it comes back to surface again, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to this, right? This is a case that I was given. This was a horse that done its suspensory. And the vet said, can you put a wide toe shoe on this horse because it's done its suspensory? But the horse was going to be working on hard, only walking for the next 6 weeks. Right? Can you see? So at that point, my job is not the extra wide toe is going to do absolutely nothing to help that horse for the next 6 weeks, because it's not even going in the school for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, and most of them are just stall rested.
Right. So most of the time, unless you're trying to protect something that's still working, like my polo horses, they're checked every day, so they have slight suspensory issues straight away. We get involved. But if you've got something that's already gone and then you're asked to protect the suspensory, well, the first thing I need to ask as a farrier is, what surface are we going to be working on while we're rehabilitating? And then in this case, the vet said, please put a wide toe shoe on because it's done its suspensory. I said, well, what are we going to be working on? What's the plan for the next 6 weeks? Are we just going to be walking on hard surface for the next 6 weeks? Okay, well, in that case, surely adding more caudal length is the important thing here, because I want to reduce the fetlock descent. So that's the thing that's important. But then if I was to put, which could have been an egg bar, but in this case the vet insisted, so I got away with it by doing the wide toe and then just giving it extra length. He didn't want an egg bar shoe on it. So I got away with it with that. But this is a question that I want to ask everybody, because this is something that I've seen loads of times on Facebook, right? You have a horse with suspensory and they put this shoe on, right? It's an egg bar with a wide toe. Let's talk about this shoe, right? Because on the hard, okay, this shoe might be effective, okay? But if we go back to these studies that I was going to talk about earlier, this is Hagen et al. And this is Riley et al. Okay, and they showed that the egg bar created far more of a toe pitch than the wide toe stopped a toe pitch. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So that means that the wide toe is far less effective at changing the pitch of the foot on a surface than the egg bar is. Right. So that means if we come back to this shoe, and let's say this horse is working on hard and soft, and we've tried to accommodate for both. We've put an egg bar shoe on with a wide toe. We know from the studies that the egg bar is going to have far more effect on the pitch of the hoof than the ability of the wide toe is to stop that.
Right.
So on the hard, this shoe becomes effective. On the soft, it becomes dangerous, because now you have an egg bar and you're going to tip that foot into the surface. Okay, so this is really the point for me. But the other thing that I wanted to mention about the effect of the wide toe is, if we think about what we talked about last week about the point of balance, right? And if you shoe around center of rotation, you're going to create a toe tip at mid stance, right?
Right.
Because you've made the ground reaction forces concentrate at the heels. I've got the slide here actually from last week.
Also, getting back to that, what your point earlier is that the deep flexor is maximally loaded just past the mid stride, right?
Yeah. So if we go back to what we talked about last week with this, so if we shoe around the center of rotation, which is on this one on the left, we concentrate the ground reaction forces at the toe, right? So if we use this shoe, but shoe around the center of rotation, then this shoe is not effective, because we have increased the ground reaction forces at the toe by shoeing around the center of rotation. And then we've put a wide toe on, and all that wide toe is going to do is counteract the increase in ground reaction forces that you created by shoeing around the center of rotation. They cancel each other out.
Right.
So if you're shoeing with a wide toe, you have to shoe around the point of balance in order to make sure that you're creating what it's intended to create, which is to stop the toe sinking and the heels sink instead. And so it comes down to fully understanding the ground reaction forces that you're trying to manipulate on the hard and on the soft to know which interventions are going to work.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's important to talk about right now is the difference in point of balance and the difference in center of rotation, because the whole take-home point is what he's talking about is 50-50 around the center of rotation, which is further back from the point of balance, which point of balance is easily compared to as the center of articulation, which is a little bit in front of center of rotation. So just to clarify for the people at home that ultimately your shoe isn't backed up as far, meaning that the wider toe is more effective. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the wide toe is only going to be, because the wide toe has been shown to be inconsistent. Okay. So both of these studies, Hagen et al. And Riley et al., both showed, you can see the numbers on the Riley et al. There, that the effect of the wide toe was inconsistent and wasn't as effective as the egg bar. Okay, so that means that when we're applying it, we have to be even more careful with understanding the ground reaction forces to make sure that we provide an environment where it's possible for it to be effective.
Right. And with that said, I feel like Tom Trozen, my buddy on here, it's not the shoes, it's the application. Absolutely. But you can apply that to literally every shoeing, right? And that's exactly what we're talking about is the application. But one thing is that the wider toe achieves the same thing as lowering the heels also because it's loading the deep more than the suspensory, correct?
Yeah, but my take on that kind of stuff is you should always start with the ideal hoof, the ideal digit, and then try and fix the ground interaction. Don't don't start. The point isn't to kind of for me to implicate other structures. It's to try and keep everything within its normal physiological range, and then try and manipulate the ground reaction forces from there. And actually, that's a really good point because that invites me quite nicely to a case that I've got here. Right. So we also know that negative plantar angles have been linked to suspensory issues. Right. It from Dyson back in 2007, I think it was. Now that doesn't make sense, does it? According to what we just said. Right. So it doesn't make sense because in this situation, you should be unloading the suspensory and increasing load on the deep digital flexor tendon. However, what happens when you have a negative plantar angle? The horse changes its posture, right? And we can see that from my research and we can see that from experiential opinion to most people I speak to is if a horse has negative plantar angles, they stand camped under, right? So the point here is I've got a case here, right? This was the horse. It stood like this on the left, right? That's how it stood, really camped under, and it had terrible suspensory inflammation, right? Now,
high, I assume, high strain.
Yeah, high strain. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to read that. I can't read that because it's too blurred. Let me get that. Let me just get up that slide so I can make sure I read it correctly. Actually, it doesn't matter. So, on the top left is what the vet prescribed the other farrier to put on. Okay. Now, he has applied this wide toe shoe beautifully. Okay. The point is that the application is not appropriate for the horse and the situation, right? So that shoeing job on the left equates to this radiograph on the right, the opposite right. Okay. So with that shoe on, he had a -5-degree plantar angle. Right. Now, this person came to me for a second opinion. And they said, Yogi, I've been reading your stuff about posture, this, that, and the other. The horse is going to be put down. Okay, this horse was very close to being put down because its suspensories were seriously inflamed, and it had these negative plantar angles. I suggested, and you can't see it in the writing, unfortunately. Maybe some people can, but I can't. I suggested that we correct to the negative plantar angle, right? Because for me, baseline has got to be physiological norm. Okay, and then you play around with everything from there. But the vet's response was, nobody in their right mind would suggest elevating palmar angle in a horse with suspensory issues. That was the response of the vet. Okay, so he insisted that all we did was shoe in this suspensory shoe. Now the horse is not working on the soft because it's absolutely knackered. It's only working on the hard, and yet the vet is insisting that the only intervention the farrier does is this shoe. Now, let's go back to this is the horse's posture in that shoe. Now, when the horse is camped under like this, what we need to think about is how that's affecting the suspensory, right? So in this position on the left, where you have the limb camped under, you have the weight of the horse coming down much further away from the foot, right? And creating a bigger, it's coming back to the same thing we learned last week, a bigger moment arm on the fetlock. So if you have a bigger moment arm on the fetlock, whose job is it to keep that fetlock off the ground, Lee?
Right.
The suspensory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this position with the camped under limb, the suspensory is constantly overloaded because of the posture. Now, on the right,
every hour of the day.
Yeah, constant all day long. Now, on the right, if I correct the hoof balance, correct the proportions, correct the phalangeal alignment, all of a sudden the horse stands up. Now its bones are stacked on each other, and the weight of the horse is coming down much closer to that center of rotation. So we've massively reduced the moment arm. Now the suspensory has exponentially less work to do just to keep this horse standing up.
Absolutely.
Right? And the point is that the amount of measured increase in suspensory strain from creating a positive angle is orders of magnitude less than the amount of strain the suspensory is being asked to take by being camped under.
Absolutely.
Right? And this is the point here, right? Now, so in the end, the vet got sacked. And the client said, Yogi, do what you feel needs to be done to this horse. So this was the shoeing package that I gave it on the bottom left. Okay. Now, I put the wide toe on. I didn't think the wide toe was necessary because we were, as I said, we were going through a rehabilitation phase. We weren't going to be going in the soft, but I did it because of how adamant the vet was about having it, right? So what I didn't want to do is get egg on my face, right? So I did the wide toe as well.
Knowing that it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, knowing it wasn't going to make a difference, right? The
Yeah.
difference was going to come from the length that I gave and the frog support padding and changing the plantar angle.
Right.
That's all. I knew that was what was going to change it, not the wide toe. But I did the wide toe to keep everyone happy. So anyway, so after I put that shoe on, this on the far right was the horse's new posture. So we've massively reduced the strain that the suspensory is being asked to take just when standing still all day long. Okay. The middle one is after the trim, by the way.
And which improved him too.
It improved him. And then when I put the shoe on, it improved further. Now, this is the horse today. Okay. This horse was going to be put down. And within 2 weeks of me changing the shoeing package and making this horse stand up, the inflammation was massively reduced, and now this horse is back in full work, and it's now barefoot.
That's right. Awesome.
Okay, so the point of this is the bigger picture. Okay, understanding biomechanics, understanding hoof ground interaction, and that's what lends you to what intervention works where, and if it will work. Plus, looking at the biomechanics and the posture of the whole horse and understanding how much posture affects strains that are being asked to take as well. So I'm hoping that all makes sense. What do you think to that? All that?
Oh man, I just love that. It just makes me want to wag my tail because stories like that are why I get out of bed and why I can't sleep at night sometimes is, like that is, it's a shame about the vet. I think the Einstein was right about being crazy for definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result, right?
The problem is, Lee, is that this is what it says in the books, right? So in the books, in the textbooks, it says if you raise the palmar angle, you increase strain on the suspensory. Okay,
right.
But the problem with that is that doesn't account for whether you're currently in a pathological situation or not, right? Obviously, if you raise the heels on an ideal hoof pastern axis, then yeah, you're going to overstrain the suspensory. But if you're raising the heels on a negative plantar angle, all you're doing is restoring the correct load share between the structures. You're not asking anything to take more than it's supposed to. So I think that's a really important take home as well, is about understanding, it comes back to the bigger picture.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
these textbooks can say these one-liners, but you have to put them in context of the horse and the situation.
Absolutely. And that was my whole take home, that my application currently is just get the horse where he was supposed to be. I always say, like, get him where God meant him to be and everything's going to be fine, because a lot of these horses have conformational issues to where they want to be negative, or they want to be this, or they want to be that. So I think you got that horse where he was supposed to go. And then, just like we were talking about before, last week, about the center of rotation, center of pressure, you just rebuild the back half of the foot, and then you get it normal, get it in normal shoes, this case barefoot. And that's amazing. And I feel like fix the problem, whatever it is, and allow the injury to heal is my foundation on this. And honestly, I was just at 5-star horseshoeing school practicing for my TE yesterday, and Remington Leach and I had the greatest conversation about suspensories. And I'd love to know your point about this, but ultimately the conclusion that we got to is that the hind end and the front end are different. And you pretty much proved it to me in your display right here, that raising the angle on the heels of the hind end doesn't drop the fetlock. Would you agree with that?
I think what is kind of, well, I don't know about that. So technically, if you was to look at the changes, let's see if we got it on the radiographs. We can't see high enough, unfortunately, in the radiographs. But that's an interesting question, because we
Right.
know that if you raise the palmar angle by 1 degree, in general, the equation is that you drop the pastern angle by 2 degrees.
Has
Right?
that ever been tested between the front and the hind, though? That's a question.
No, that's a good question. That's a good question. But I think, for me, I don't know if it's how relevant it is, because for me, it's about this. So even if you technically dropped the pastern angle, but the same as you would have in the front, the fact that the horse is now stood up and stacking its bones on top of each other, and you've massively reduced the moment arm,
Right.
I think that far outweighs any kind of intricate changes in which bones have moved where. I
Exactly.
mean,
And
that's the
ultimately, you're
bigger
giving him
picture,
a prosthetic for what he didn't have. You trimmed
right?
him and you gave it back, and then once he grew the correct hoof, then you backed out and went to barefoot. Right.
Yes, yeah. So what we did was, so I shod him very much around the center rotation, because I wanted to build up the back half of that foot, right? So I shod him very long. You can see he's 50-50 around the center of rotation there. And because the foot on the left was never going to go barefoot, it wasn't going to be comfortable enough. It was completely negative, blah, blah, blah. So the reason I shot him round center rotation is coming back to this from what we had last week. The reason I shot him round center rotation was because I wanted to develop the back of the foot. We developed the back of the foot, which enabled us to then turn into a barefoot horse who had. So I actually very often, my opinion is, and a lot of farriers probably won't like me for saying this, right? And most horses, certainly horses working on the soft, don't need shoes, right? Unless you're doing a particular job like sliding or things that need a particular job. But I'm talking about things like dressage, which is the main thing that this horse done, that this horse did. If the horse has got good balance, good conformation, isn't creating a foot that morphs negatively, that creates imbalance, then I try, most of my horses in this situation, I try to aim to transition back to barefoot. But very often that requires sensible shoeing that manipulates ground reaction forces for a certain therapeutic benefit in order to create a foot that's strong enough to go barefoot. Does that make sense? How
So what do
much
you?
barefoot?
So right now he's saying when you have a problem with the foot, go back to your last week's. Go again.
This one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So ultimately, what he's saying right now is that if you got a problem with the back half of the foot and you have heel failure, for example, you've got to get the back half of the foot right and then grow into the picture on the left. And then when he gets normal, shoe him normal is what he's saying, or you can leave him barefoot. But
Yeah.
the take home though is that the picture on the left, he had to work to get that there as well. So we're not
Yeah.
trying to mislead anybody here, is what I'm saying. And as
Yeah.
far as
Yeah. For
and
sure.
as
Definitely.
and as far as your barefoot question, I love barefoot. It's awesome, but just the reality is that it doesn't always work, and a lot of times that comes through the parking lots and the owner and the
Yeah.
schedule,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
the whole thing. But just for example, my wife personally loves the feel of barefoot on the hind on the majority of her horses. And if you've got a horse that flattens out and doesn't stay collected and they need more traction, because that's usually the combo, then you're going to have to do whatever you got to do. But what I have found is that horses that want to be negative on the hind feet, you can't, or it's hard to rehab them barefoot. But once you rehab the back of the foot, how you described, then you can maintain them better barefoot because the frog is more in action and you've got a heel, healthy heels, and a just great place to start. That would
Yeah.
be my opinion of that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really, really good point, actually. And it's something that I talk about a lot because what you have to realize is that when you have a negative plantar angle like this, it creates this posture on the left. So let's pretend this horse is barefoot, right? Hasn't got shoes on, it's barefoot. If you have a negative plantar angle barefoot, the horse is going to assume this posture on the left. And this posture on the left is going to keep those heels constantly overloaded, the back of that foot constantly overloaded, right? So even in the barefoot environment, that's why it can become very difficult to rehabilitate negative plantar angles in the hind because the posture is perpetuating the balance in the foot. So that's why I've completely agree with you that very often when you have negative plantar angles, you have to put something on because
Right.
and to move that posture to stop that back of the foot from being overloaded. Um, let's should we try and get back to suspensories?
Yes, but hold on before we do though.
Yeah,
So we need to move on to the front suspensories. We got several questions about that. Ramon
yeah.
Batella is asking, can this be rewatched later? Busy with work right now. Ramon, don't be lying. You live in Costa Rica. You're on a beach. You can do it. I believe in you. Just kidding. Know your shoeing. Levi, how do we apply these principles to the forelimb? Kimberly said, with suspensory injuries, you want them on harder ground than soft ground, correct? Does that depend on the individual or the location of the suspensory injury? What a great question, Kimberly.
It's a great question. I think if you've got a genuinely um, if you've got an acute injury in the suspensory, I mean, I'm not a vet, right? But it makes sense to me that you want to try and keep them off the soft because more than likely that injury was created on the soft. So you want to keep them off the soft, get things right, reduce the inflammation and stuff like that. I'm not a vet, but if you are going to have them on the soft, then you really need to think about um, stopping maintaining that foot at the correct orientation.
So,
That is more of a vet question, I think, actually.
well,
But from my logic,
I'll weigh in on that too, and I
yeah,
completely agree with you. So anytime you have a suspensory injury, you need a great vet, not a good vet. You need a great vet. And the takeaway that I've seen from that is that it's stall rest, it's hand walking. Think my simple mind would explain it like this. So you broke your arm. What do? They put it in a cast. Why? So that it calms down and it heals. So the last thing you want to do is be getting that horse in a situation where you're going to irritate it, would be my takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Laszlo is talking about um, he can do everything we can do with the with the with the composite shoes. Yeah, I like, we're both like, do whatever, man. Whatever you want to do is how you want to do it is great. We're just talking about the effects, So like barefoot, glue-ons, composite, nail on, however you want to go about it.
Yeah, and Joe's said something. She said, "I stopped listening when you started focusing on shoes, especially steel ones. I'm an OTTB endurance rider that has ridden most of my 3,000 plus miles barefoot or with boots or temporary 3 to 4 day glue-ons. How often do you hear thoroughbred barefoot and endurance in the same sentence? It can be done." I do not want to take anything away from that, Joe, at all, because I agree with you. Okay, I'm not here to disagree with that. However, I have to I have to say that if people are doing that, then they have the correct environment, they have the correct um, diet, they have the correct general management of that horse. Um, and yes, many things can be done barefoot, but I shoe polo horses. Okay, polo horses cannot play polo barefoot. Not in England, not on a wet turf. Everyone is going to fall over and break their backs or their legs, right? So shoes become a necessity. I don't want this talk to become about barefoot versus shod. I agree. And I'm sure Lee would also agree. Of course, it can be done. But if you're going to be doing those things barefoot, then the management, the onus is then on the owner for management.
Absolutely. I would like to weigh in on this. So Joe, that's congratulations. That's quite a feat. That's pretty intense stuff. We actually trim a couple endurance riders' horses, and they get along great. And my biggest takeaway, and one of the most educational things I've done, is early on I went to a Pete Ramey barefoot clinic, and he led the conversation with this. He said, "Everybody comes here to learn my trim, but what I'm going to teach you is the importance of diet, schedule." And that is so key. And that's why I'm with Platinum Hoof Care supplements now, is because it's a whole horse approach. You don't get to just have good feet and poor body condition and hair coat and just this whole unhealthy horse, healthy feet, or healthy horse and unhealthy feet. It all goes together. So I think one thing that the barefoot community has figured out is that. And I think that's why a lot of their horses can go barefoot. So I'm behind you, but we are horseshoers, and a lot of the times that we need traction. And I am a big barefoot fan, though. So,
definitely.
Let's get back. Please keep asking questions. This is great.
So Jamie's asked a good question here. She asked, "Is there a guideline or rule of thumb you follow when adding elevation? For example, is it okay to wedge them the entire amount they need to get the PA correct, or do you change it a couple of degrees at a time?" That's a great question. For me, I want to get the foot over a certain threshold with where I think it's going to have positive morphological changes during the next cycle. Okay, so I need to get the foot to a place. If we have something, an acute injury, a DDFT's blown or something like that, then I'm going to put that. I'm going to create a straight hoof pastern axis. I'm going to give it as much elevation as it needs to put that DDFT taking the strain it's supposed to take, because we have an acute injury. Okay, the tendon's gone. The priority at that point is to protect the tendon. However, if I've got a horse that has a low PA and a poor caudal hoof, but we're not acutely lame, we haven't got an acute injury, then I don't mind giving it enough elevation that will provide me with positive changes and then allow that to continue cycle over cycle. I tend to, my maximum, yeah, it does depend, I'm afraid. My maximum that I've kind of apply in daily practice is kind of 6 degrees. And that's usually when we have a very negative, we had a negative planter angle. And for anything with a low planter angle or palmar angle that's not negative, I usually go around 3-4 degrees. And then I assess from there. I assess comfort. And the other thing to understand is that this is not about PA, because there's no number for PA. That's important to understand, right? There's no. It's not about PA. It's about the relationship between the three phalanges, and it's about the strain that relationship requests of the different soft tissues. That's what it's about. It's not about this horse needs a 6-degree PA. This horse needs a PA that creates a relationship between the phalanges that optimizes soft tissue share, load share. So having said that, it's important to understand that sometimes these, like with hoof pastern axis, especially when you're looking at the proximal phalanx, sometimes you have postural changes. Okay, so you have to be careful that you don't want to try and create the absolutely perfect phalangeal alignment when you have a horse that's actually changing its HPA posturally. And sometimes that posture is because it needs more elevation, so it relaxes after you give it more elevation, but not necessarily. So these things really do depend. You have to really assess the individual, because very often I've had a horse where I've elevated it by 3 or 4 degrees, and it still has a broken back hoof pastern axis in terms of P1 to P3. But a couple of days later, you come back and it's relaxed, and that P1 angle comes down, and then you have a straight phalangeal alignment. So you have to be careful. I don't know if I rambled on too long there, but hopefully that made sense.
I want to jump in on that one too. So
go for it,
Jamie. So Yogi, it brings a theory, and I bring the practical here. So I love his input there, but just as simply put, if you had a rock in you got two theories here. Okay, you got the whole leg adjusted to being at a certain angle, right? The tendons, the ligaments, everything is set there. So on certain situations, yes, you want to go slow. So if you had an upright foot, a club foot, you need to ease that down, or you will have a problem. I feel like if you have any type of failure, negative angles, it's more of like a rock in a shoe kind of thing. Do you want me to take the rock out and put a smaller rock in it, or do you want me to take the rock out? So that's the way that I would approach it. So if you got to get that horse up, if he's negative, to an angle to where he's not going to hurt himself. And I'm with Yogi. Like, people get caught up on percentages, angles. You're talking about making somebody fit in a mold that isn't right. It's just like the differences between me and Yogi personally. Like, there's just conformational differences in us. So if you try to make me him, you're going to cripple me. And if you try to make him me, you're going to cripple him. So the point is that they're individuals, and keep it to where I just back up to. If you keep it where God meant it to be, everything's going to be fine. So let's go back. Let's go back to Levi. Sorry, Levi. So Levi was at the hoof care. He's a great farrier from Arizona. Ropes very well too. So he wants to know, how do we apply these principles to the forelimb?
So all of these principles that we were talking about apply to the forelimb. So if we're looking at the forelimb, this is a forelimb. So the application that's applied to both limbs is that the main job of the suspensory is to stop overextension of the fetlock, right? So that's the main job, and it gets injured when that fetlock extension exceeds its capacity to stop it, right? That applies to both limbs. In the front limb, we're looking at two different mechanisms that we need to look after. Okay, we need to consider the front foot toe dipping every time the foot's loaded. That comes down to shoeing around point of balance versus shoeing around center of rotation in everyday shoeing. However, there are caveats to that, as we talked about last week, because you have to think about shoeing cycle length. But I'm not going to go over all that again, but you can go watch last week's thing to catch up on that. So there's the caveat there. But the point is that if you're shoeing a performance horse, this comes back to this. If you're shoeing a performance horse, okay, you want to shoe around the correct datum point to make sure that that toe doesn't sink in. Okay, so that's important for the suspensory in front, is having a level foot at mid stance on a soft surface. Okay, that's important
because they're going to probably spend most time in stall rested unless you're rehabbing them. Correct?
Yeah. Well, so and then if you're looking after suspensory on the hard, then you're talking about different mechanics. Then you're talking about reducing fetlock drop, in which case you're looking at cantilever effect, and you're looking at this reducing that moment arm. So in which case you're then looking at applying egg bars. Okay, so egg bar is about reducing fetlock descent. Wide toes is about reducing toe sink on the soft. And the important thing is they are opposite interventions. So you have to understand the surface that you're working on and what the vet actually wants you to shoe for. Okay, so that's how you apply all of these principles to the front limb. Hopefully that makes sense, or has answered your question.
Levi, how are we feeling? Did we answer your question? Sorry, it took a while to get that.
I just thought it'd be good to summarize the whole thing. So let's read. Ramon's got a question. So if you fix posture by providing caudal support and improving PA and HPA, are you being able to recover the digit cushion caudal hoof? Where is the line drawn between conformation creating posture or posture creating conformation? How many of these horses should we keep mechanical help forever versus others that you can wean them? Okay, great questions.
That's a veterinarian, everybody. That's a fair
that's
a good question.
So the answer is that if you shoe around center of rotation, and provide support, packaging, deformable support, those kind of things, yes, you will. In most cases, certainly in most cases that I've experienced, you will recover the caudal hoof. And then your job is to transition out of this package into a flat package. And then you make decisions on whether you want to start moving into shoeing for performance on the left and no longer shoeing around center of rotation. However, of course, you have to factor in shoeing cycle length. So I shoe my polo horses every 4 weeks. In 4 weeks, they don't have time for that balance to become bad enough to not shoe around point of balance. If you've got a horse that's growing loads of foot and it's on 6 weeks, then you might always have to shoe around center of rotation. Now, when it comes the line drawn between conformation creating posture or posture creating conformation, the answer is we don't know for the individual. Okay, they both affect one another. So, as a farrier, my job is to create a base that would facilitate the ideal posture, and then I say to the physio or the vet or the chiropractor, I've done my job down here, but there's a relationship here with posture. So can you please make sure that everything upstairs is working correctly and is not creating this posture? So that's where you have to have a teamwork. You have to have a relationship with the vets and the physios to address that conformation creating posture and posture creating conformation. And I don't call it conformation, I call it hoof morphology. Conformation is dangerous is a dangerous word to be used when you're talking about deformations of the hoof, because conformation suggests that it's unchangeable.
Well,
So
but I'll weigh in on this one too, and it's just anecdotally, Ramon, like many of our theories are. But I feel like it. I'm going to argue Yogi right here. I do think that confirmation is important, because on the ones that say, if we're talking about heel failure, for example, to where the foot is going forward, much like your question you had at the summit. So if you've got whatever issue is going on, like if you've got a metabolic horse or whatever, if you've got something that is directly drilling holes in your boat from being successful, well, then those horses are the ones that typically have to stay in an appliance, in my experience. It's like if you're talking heel failure, for example, I I would guess the ones that grow out of it are 50-50. And just if you just want to be close, I would say that if man made it, man can fix it. But if it's a bad conformation flaw, then it's probably entering a maintenance level at my experience.
yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. I completely agree that if you have a horse that is always going to move back into the poor hoof balance as soon as you take the package off, then stay in the package. um, but um, but like coming back to this case here of the polo horse and that is you have to make those decisions for the individual and the job that it's got to do, and those kind of things. But yeah, absolutely. If you've got a horse with very poor inherent architecture of the hoof, very poor digital cushion, very weak lateral cartilages, very non-existent digital cushion. If you have something with a really long pastern that always overloads and drops a lot in the pastern and overloads the back of the foot. If you've got these conformational things, then they lend towards a weaker foot that, yes, that may need to live in a package. So yeah, I completely agree with you there, Lee. I don't disagree at all.
Oh, perfect. We've got one very serious comment right here. Go ahead and you can pronounce that name, Yogi, and take that one. And Joy said, while you're reading that, I'll do Joyce. So Joy said, once you balance the hoof capsule and help the pain meridian lines that were coming from poor feet, body posture will greatly improve. Absolutely, Joy. But I think what Yogi was talking about, though, is like on a lot of this stuff, the horse breaks down from compensatory lameness, right? And you end up getting a lot of times that I've seen with this is hock and stifle issues. And that's where you're going to need the good vet. And that's where a team approach is a huge win. And I think that's more what Yogi meant. Is that right, Yogi?
Yeah, but we also, so if you look at some of the webinars that I've done in the past, Joe, where I've done talks with Dr. Gelman, we've spoken about three major proprioceptive input centers. One of them is the TMJ in the teeth, the upper cervical region, and the hoof. And there are many, many other areas in the horse that will have huge impact on those meridian lines, on the myofascial lines, and on posture in general. The hoof, yes, does have a profound impact on posture, but it's definitely not the only thing that has a profound impact on posture. In fact, the entire domestic setting has a massive impact on the horse's posture. And I've talked about that extensively as well, like stabling, the way we feed them, the way we ride them, all of these things have an impact on posture. And so feet can definitely become the victim of that. They're not always the cause. And so we can correct the feet and it can still go backwards because those other factors can be powerful as well. So we can't always think that fixing the hoof and you fix everything because there's so many other factors.
Great point.
Okay, let me read this. I didn't get to read this. So the vet was probably thinking of a big wedge and that way dropping the fetlock. I worked this way with suspensory issues before too. A good trim and a bit of dim at the palm or plant aspect of foot goes a long way, and correct placement of the shoe, even without using a wedge. I think, yeah. So I completely agree. Actually, one of the main things we said last week, Lee, wasn't it, was that very often all it needs is a good trim. Like actually, if I add this to the stage, this was one of Lee's images.
I can't see it, just so you know.
Oh, you can't see it. Oh, I can't see it. I've added it to the stage. Who can see an X-ray on the screen? What can you see on the screen? Nothing. Oh, that's annoying. Okay. Anyway, unfortunately, everyone else can. Okay, good. They can see it. So, this is Lee's. The image you sent me of the really bad negative plantar angle with tons of toe on it. So I've put that on. So, actually, this is something we talked about last week, wasn't it, Lee? About sometimes it just needs a good old decent trim, and it doesn't need all of these packages put on. The amount of times I go around the world and presented with these negative palmar or plantar angles that are what I call grade one, which is all it needs is someone to chop all the toe off and you completely repitch the foot. So very often, yes, it is just a case of repitching the foot with your trim, giving it a little bit of packaging, and then allowing it to, and correct placement of the shoe, and then allowing it to develop over time. So I completely agree with you. If I'm doing, and Ramon Batalla will be able to vouch for this as well. If I'm doing anything above a 6-degree wedge from a negative plantar angle or palmar angle rather, I'd move into a banana shoe. And I don't, you don't seem to get the fetlock drop with a banana. I don't know what your experience of that is, Lee.
I would like to weigh in. So many times, the reason why I wanted that severely negative plantar angle, I think it was, I can't see it right now, but it's so important because, like, if I could empower any farrier or horse owner that is listening right here, it's like X-rays are good, X-rays are great, but like we talked last week, it's a 2D image, not a 3D horse, so you got to consider all things involved. But so many times, as a farrier, we'll get approached by, not to worry, I've got X-rays. Well, thank you for doing that. But if you got an extreme case like this and you want me to draw an opinion from that X-ray, it's not even close. But you need to trim all that off and then take another X-ray is what you need to do. And that's what's hard, the availability of X-rays. But if you really want to make a difference in a horse, get your vet there, get your farrier there, and work at the same time. And after trim X-ray, get that foot trimmed absolutely perfect is my takeaway from that. And then we'll make a plan. That I don't like, so many people will ask me, what do you think we're going to do? I'll be like, well, can I get back to you after we get him trimmed?
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'd say on that is just to add a little secret tool, really. So if you look at this X-ray, if you measure the bone angle, the angle of the bone, we know that bone angle plus plantar angle, in this case, bone angle plus plantar angle equals the hoof angle. So if I'm presented with this radiograph, I'll take the bone angle, okay, and then I'll trim it all off, and then I'll measure the hoof angle. And by doing that, I know the plantar angle that I've created. I don't need another X-ray. I know the plantar angle that I've created because I just take away the bone angle from the hoof angle, and that gives me the plantar angle. So, but I don't disagree. It's always great to have X-rays post trim, absolutely.
And if you don't have X-rays, I'm jumping in with you here. I'm just saying, don't make a plan until you get the trim right.
Yeah. And if you, interestingly, if you look at this X-ray, you can see that if this is a hind foot, and if you look at the angle that this limb is coming into the block. You can just see that this horse is probably camped under so far he's almost touching his front limb. And if this had suspensory issues, this is just a great example, because you could put you could put a wide toe on this all day long, but that the suspensory issues is coming from the fact that this horse camps under like an elephant on a ball, and that's what's creating the suspensory issues. So,
hey, we need to go back up to. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce. Can you pronounce? Is it Curran?
yeah, I don't know. I think I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I must say, but
Well, no offense for us not being able to say your name. If you can help us with that, we'll definitely comment on that. But ultimately, you're a veterinarian. Is that correct? Is that what he's saying right there?
yes.
So that's so awesome. We got 2 vets on here right now, and ultimately the comment is about that. We as vets don't know enough about farriery, and that he's got a great AWCF locally that he gets to work with, and they work as a team. Ultimately, is the takeaway from this.
I think it's a she.
She. Oh, I'm very sorry. Very sorry.
I might be wrong, but I think it's not that it matters.
You stuck your neck out there too. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't. I think I know. I think I know her.
Well, I will say this. I love the attitude then in that comment. Working as a team, it can be a roller coaster. You need a good farrier as bad as you need a vet. So that's awesome.
Great. So, did you want to? Have we got?
We got
anything else?
We got another question. I really expected a better comment from Luke Sheehan. I know you can do it. Robert Timmons. Come on, guys. Adrian, Tyler, Nancy. I believe in you guys.
Where are these comments? I can't. The Luke Sheehan.
Will you ever have a metabolic diet management discussion? I think that is going to. I think we're going to need a vet on board for that one.
Yeah, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and it's definitely not my area of expertise. So I'll stick to. I'm more than happy. We can get someone else on with us, couldn't we? But
I wonder if there's anybody in Costa Rica that could take a break from being on the beach and join us.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. Hey, since I can actually see now, because I got it pulled up on my phone, can you flash my shoes up there and just kind of
yes, sir.
Just go through everything that I sent you and we'll talk about it.
Okay. Well, do you want me, I've got these ones.
Oh yeah. All right. So these shoes, this was go back.
You want to go back to the shoes?
Yeah.
You go. I think you've got a bit of a lag. I think it's taken a minute to.
All right. So these shoes, this is a suspensory shoe, and previously, like this shoe, I actually tried to just widen it, heating the toe up, and just whooping this thing, just trying to stretch it out to get some more surface area. Decided I didn't get enough. Welded in some bar stock, and yes, I successfully got that, but that was on a cutting horse, and I mean it absolutely works in soft footing, because it just wrecked this horse's heels. So that's my big takeaway, is that you better know what you're doing when you're transferring loads. And I don't know, I think that was too much in hindsight, but my mentality in life is if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. And you got to be careful on that, because that's getting pretty close to pushing on the tip of the frog, which is by the circumflex artery. And anytime you push on that, you will have problems. So careful.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to. What else have I got?
Can you pull up the video that I sent you?
Yeah, the videos don't work. I tried.
Okay, go to the pictures of the barrel racing. So I want to talk about.
This one.
I can barely watch this, just so you guys know. This is a very special horse of my wife's, and this horse fell down because the ground was absolutely terrible. I know all farriers make fun of barrel racers talking about the ground, but it is they make such a big deal out of it because it is a huge deal. Because if the ground is slower, deep, and loose, then it's slower, and if it's packed, it's loose and sketchy. But then if it's loose and doesn't have any footing, they can also fall, and that's exactly what happened here. And the stakes were high on this run. She really needed it, even though we knew the ground was bad. Horse never fell down, been to a few hundred rodeos, very high level. And she fell down. And if you look in on this picture, you can see her right leg is behind her and her left. She did the splits. Can you go? Is there another picture there?
I've got.
So you can see.
Oh yeah, you can see there. Yeah.
Through both pictures that this was awful. I mean, this is probably the first time I've looked at it since I sent it to you, and that happened in September. So this horse was in stall rest. We had a great vet that's working on it. They used Renovo, they used Shockwave, they used stall rest, and they said she broke her hock and she strained her suspensory. And yes, I was consulting God a lot on this one because this is important, probably greatest asset. And complete healing happened. There was no tears in the suspensory, and it is down to the normal size on the sonogram, and we are very happy about that. And they cannot find any fractures in the hock now, so it's seriously complete healing. But I think it is so important to rehab them correctly, and how I did that was just barefoot with a good trim on a schedule and with a great vet. So
yeah, brilliant. Yeah, sometimes it's just keep it simple, isn't it?
oh yeah,
yeah.
I take it a little too far sometimes, but that's kind of the point. I don't do you have those slider pictures on here?
I can get them. I think.
It's
yeah, we didn't. No, I didn't.
Either way, whatever.
So we got a question here. Somebody wants me to clarify the bone angle plus hoof angle thing. So she's put bone angle plus hoof angle equals plantar angle. Can you offer some insight to measure that for an angle idiot? So let me clarify for you. It's bone angle plus palmar angle equals hoof angle. Okay. So if you work backwards, hoof angle, if you measure the external hoof angle and take the bone angle away, that leaves you with your palmar angle, right? So once you know a horse's bone angle, so if you ever have a radiograph of your horse, measure the bone angle, because once you measure the bone angle, you know what its palmar angle is for the rest of its life just by measuring hoof angle. It's really useful. That's one of the things that we use hoof map for, because on hoof map we have a bone angle measurement thing. So yeah, so it's really good because then all you got to do is take away the bone angle from the hoof angle and it tells you the palmar or plantar angle. You got a question for you there, Lee, from Nancy. Given that barrel image, do you sling a horse who can't bear weight on the sore leg to maintain trim schedule?
I have a very good diagram that I want to show everybody on here. And as a farrier, it is very important. So right here, we've got a road right there. And this is going to be my lane.
So, I'm going to see if I can highlight you.
You can't see.
Hang on, I'm going to highlight you.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is my lane. That's where I live. This is the vet's lane over here. And your question is in over here. So I try really hard to stay out of the vet's lane, and that would be 100% on them. And I think I say it all the time, but like everybody talks about needing a good farrier, you need a good vet too, and working as a team, and that would be where I would rely on them.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely. Has anyone got anything they want me to clarify on any of the kind of biomechanics stuff that I said earlier? Or hopefully Lee simplified some of it for you nicely, or I was clear enough, just in case there's any questions on that.
Yeah, don't hit Yogi hard. I promise you can't stump him. We should have a bounty, Yogi, for anybody that can stump you. Ramon, we're counting on you here. So there's more comments here I think that you're missing. So Luke Sheehan is a farrier in Wyoming, and his wife is a veterinarian, and I'm a farrier listening in. Imogene is huge throughout the whole process. Kieran, sorry, I don't know how to say your name. I think you should indeed leave that discussion to the vets about metabolic issues. Amen.
Definitely.
Joy is saying that that'd be wonderful to have a vet well versed on a topic to educate along with us. Levi says, thank you so much for doing these videos. It's much appreciated. Nancy, we covered that about the sling. My wife's being funny right now. Jamie says, did you ever think in high school that you would know geometry to be a farrier? I'd lose a lot of bets on my projection on life if you asked me at 18. Alan Vaughn says, most people overlook what it takes to be a good farrier. 46 years here, just saying. I agree. Yeah, that's if I've learned anything, it's that I know I'm going to learn some more, because the guy 15 years ago or whatever it was when I started shoeing in 08, that nearly 20 now, had it all figured out. And right now I'm saying I don't have it figured out. So Alan also says the hair above the hairline belongs to the vet. Just saying. No, that's what we're saying.
Well,
too.
We're not going to disagree with you.
Tyler says, would you repeat bone and hoof angle again? There you go, Yogi.
Okay, right. I've got diagrams for this, but I haven't got them available to me. Anyway, so what I'll do is I'll put this back up for a second. Right. So the bone angle is literally, you take the angle of the front surface of P3 with the solar surface of P3, so that how wide the actual bone is, right? That's the bone angle. Can you do like markers on this or not? Do you know, Lee?
I think we might have to learn this for next time.
We'll look into that. Okay. Anyway, so the physical, the width of the bone is the bone angle, right? So the front surface of the pedal bone and the solar surface of the pedal bone create an angle. That's the bone angle. That bone angle plus the palmar or plantar angle equals the angle of the hoof, of the external hoof, right? So in this case, we have, let's have a guess, we have a 50-degree bone angle, and we have a minus 5-degree, let's just use an easy number, of a minus 5-degree plantar angle, right? So 50 plus minus 5, yeah, equals a 45-degree hoof angle, right? Because the plantar angle is negative, so you take it away from the bone angle to get your 45-degree hoof angle. So if I trim this hoof and I end up with a 50-degree hoof angle, I now know that I have a 0-degree palmar angle because my bone angle was 50. So 50 plus 0 is 50. I'm hoping that makes sense now, right? So that you add the two together and it gives you a hoof angle. So if anyone wants it any clearer than that, maybe next week I'll have an image for it just to make it really clear. But hopefully that's clear enough.
I think that would be a great topic. I don't know. Does everybody else agree? I think that if you could break that down with some exact measurements, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, no worries. We can do that next week. We can talk about. We'll talk about. Why don't next week we talk about some things that you can work out from X-rays? Let's do that. That can be one of them.
What's everybody think about that?
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, please. Somebody's put.
Sweet.
So Ben Hansen has asked, can you touch on when the suspensory is under peak load during locomotion and how the wide toe helps on soft surfaces? Yes, so we definitely covered that, but I'm more than happy to do it again for you. So the suspensory, according to the latest paper, Takahashi et al. 2014, the maximum load of the suspensory is bang on mid stance. It's actually, to be precise, 49 point something percent of the stance. Okay, basically 50%. Bang on mid stance is the maximum strain of the suspensory ligament. Right now, when it comes to the wide toe on soft surfaces, that is more to do with the ground reaction force distribution. Okay. How do I basically, if you look at this, pressure equals force divided by area. So the amount of pressure in the toe is dependent on the amount of area that the toe covers. Basic maths, right? So because you've increased the area, then your area reduces the pressure because it distributes the force, right? So you have less pressure in the toe, which means that on a soft surface, the wide toe works because it dissipates the pressure. I'll try that. Hopefully, that's in nice, simple terms for you. It's
Tell us
about
if that,
ground.
tell us if that makes sense to you. We got another question. Ryan Jennings said, if a horse had a excuse me, if a horse had a laminitic episode, then the calculation would no longer work? Question mark. And fresh X-rays would be the only way to know the palmar angle? Question mark. We will cover this next week.
Absolutely, Ryan. You're absolutely spot on, my man. Ryan used to work for me. Ryan's worked for me in polo season a couple of times. Last season, I think it was, or the season before. Anyway, yes, Ryan, you're absolutely right. As soon as you've had a laminetic episode, then the relationship between the parietal surface of P3 and the dorsal wall are no longer parallel. So all equations are out the window. That's why radiographs are absolutely vital for laminitis.
Yeah, one thing is that I see so many people trying to be on a budget with a laminitic horse, whether that's founder, sinker, or whatever. The thing is we as farriers, I don't know if horse owners and farriers are both listening, but I assume so. But the thing is like you now own a diabetic. Like the stakes are high, and you have to be very careful with that because you cannot read the outside of the hoof as well as you used to. So now X-rays are critical, I feel like, and then they're just one bad day away from having another episode, and I don't know, just fresh X-rays, absolutely important.
Yeah, it's so important. Levi's asked, do you find most bone angles to be about 50 degrees? I refuse. I'll be honest with you, I'm going to refuse to answer the question because as soon as you do that, it becomes dangerous because people start to assume that all horses, there can be such a wide variation. You can have anything from, well, I don't know if the research has actually been done on the standard deviation from 50 degrees, but I know horses that have got 40-degree bone angles, and I know horses that have got 55, 60-degree bone angles. So the point is it comes back to what you're saying, Lee, is don't be cheap. If you've got a horse and you've got no history of radiographs, take a radiograph. Just take one. Not for a reason, just to get baseline. Just to get baseline understanding of your horse's internal anatomy is going to be very helpful for everybody. So
absolutely. I feel like Levi, great questions. Thanks for being part of this. I feel like I refuse that as well, just because I couldn't tell you anyway, because that's something I don't even monitor, because I feel like horses are such individuals that if you try to stuff them into certain angles or what it looks like in a textbook, you're going to cripple some horses. Ask me how I know. And I feel like, I just feel like that's dangerous, but I know you didn't mean that question that way. I'm just saying, we're just saying.
Oh, yeah.
Cool, so.
Yeah, but as soon as if you see any teaching that dictates exact angles for anything, be really careful. I mean, you've only got to look at the Strasser stuff to know that it's dangerous.
We got some,
So,
yeah, we got some good questions on here too. Yogi, this one's for you. Robert,
yeah.
thank you so much for commenting. That's a great question. If you only have bad x-rays, is the bone angle still accurate? Example, crooked or hanging off the block. You know, before Yogi talks, I'm just going to say that is a huge pet peeve. I see a lot of horse owners charged for x-rays that you can't take anything away from.
Yeah. It's a great question, and it definitely is important to put the responsibility back on the vet here, because we have a job to do, and in order for us to do our job in assessing things properly, we need to have something that's correctly readable. And the answer is no, they're not. If the X-ray is rubbish, don't even bother looking at it for anything, because if you have an oblique radiograph, your PA's wrong. All your relationships are wrong. So it's a great question, and because it's a great point, is that any farriery assessment is only as good as the photograph or the radiograph that you're looking at. So, great question.
All right. So Sarah says, I wish I could see all the comments. We apologize about that, but we're going live on Olsen Equine. We're going live on the Equine Documentalist and both of our YouTube pages. So sorry about that, but we're reading majority of them off. And Kieran, I really wish I could say your name because I love your input. And she always says that she is a vet, and she says that she always tries to be there for the process of the trim and shoeing, and she discounts the x-rays as often as she can, as she knows will be a higher likelihood of a better outcome. Amen. That is awesome. I wish everybody did that. And
Yeah.
Adrian, Robert, Sarah, Catherine, Levi, everybody likes the idea of talking about x-rays next week and just shoeing with them, and what you were talking about, the bone angle.
Yeah.
Sarah says, yeah, I own one of those, and the last shoer undid 5 years and 7 months of work in 30 minutes by removing half of her sole, mostly at the toe. Yeah, if you got a laminitic, that toe is depth is high value property.
Yep.
Cash has a question. How close do the shoulder angle and the hoof angle correlate?
So that's a really good question, actually, because obviously historically we're taught that they should be the same, right? That the pastern angle and the shoulder angle should be the same. And half of me is still that way inclined, but then half of me appreciates that the shoulder is attached to the horse only through muscle.
Yeah, you can
So,
cut it off with a knife.
yeah, so it's the problem is shoulder angle can be massively influenced posturally. So
yeah.
how do you know that you're matching to a correct shoulder angle? So I think for me, the way I judge correct hoof angle has got to come back to spatial relationships between the point of balance concept, but phalangeal alignment in short. Something, yeah. I think I'd rather focus on creating near straight phalangeal alignment, or at least near straight hoof pastern axis, because that's important to understand that they're different. Maybe we can talk about that next week as well. Radiographically, they can be quite different. So I'm talking about external hoof pastern axis being within a few degrees of norm. I'd rather judge my hoof angle on that than on shoulder angle when I don't know the clinical history of the shoulder area and posture and those kind of things.
Good answer. I agree. I feel like every old time farrier says you got to match or horse owner, for example, says you need to match that. And I'm with you, Yogi, but we should dive into that next week. Jack's got a good question here. Do you consider the gap between the joints being even on individual legs and both legs? Is he talking about rotational, or is he talking
I
about
think he's
both?
talking about joint spacing. I assume we're talking about joint spacing, and
Like a medial
yeah,
lateral
I
balance you're
absolutely.
talking about?
I mean, if you're talking about joint spacing, I absolutely consider joint spacing. I think, and again, to come back to phalangeal alignment, if you have relatively good phalangeal alignment, most of the time that lends itself to relatively good joint spacing. That's certainly what I've experienced. So yes, so he is saying joint spacing. So yes, we're gonna we're robbing next week's talk a little bit here because next week we're going to talk about radiographs and reading radiographs. So let's not get too deep into that because that can definitely be something we can talk about next week. Joint spacing.
Yeah, with the right visuals too. That'd be
Yeah, exactly. No, side bones can be talked about another time as well. I think. If anyone's got any more questions on suspensory, we can take them. But we've been going for an hour and 45 now, so I think we're probably exhausted most of the questions.
I'm gonna quickly answer Emily though. So here's my take on side bone was what you're talking about. So every time I'll see people really freak out about side bone, what you need to be more concerned about is what caused the side bone. And usually it's medial lateral imbalance, in my opinion. And when you get that corrected, magically the horse does good. Does the side bone go away? No. But the horse usually does better when you correct in the imbalances.
Definitely.
All right. So if we don't have any more questions, that was awesome, Yogi. What a great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. That was great. Yeah, it's yeah, suspensory is a lot more complicated than it can first appear. There's a lot of different factors to consider: surfaces, pitches, moment arms, all those kind of things. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting subject. So I
Absolutely.
enjoyed that. Well, everyone loved it by the looks of it. So fantastic. So I think that's agreed then, is it? Next week we're going to do some radiograph reading stuff.
Yeah, just mainly about shoeing and your bone angle that we're talking about, and we'll just
Yeah.
throw in just the focus on helping shoeing wise. None of it is diagnostic in any way.
No, yeah, absolutely. We're not vets. We're not going to diagnose stuff, but we can talk about spatial relationships and those kind of things from a balance perspective. So that's what we're looking at. Ryan, if you missed the first part, buddy, you can watch them again. The lives stay on our feed, so you can go watch that again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for the great questions. That really makes it enjoyable for us. I know for me anyway, and just thank everybody for being on here. And don't forget that we're going to move this to subscriber only eventually. So sign up on the Equine Documentalist or on my page, the Olsen Equine CJF, and we'll keep going. And I know just on that topic, Yogi, I'd like you to weigh in on this, but with all the comments on Facebook, it is hard to keep up with, and a lot of it you don't want to see. And the subscriber onlys are really cool, aren't they? Because that's all of the hecklers, all of the BS is gone, and you can actually have intelligent conversations. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely, 100%. It just takes the conversation to another level because we can really get into more deep stuff. And yeah, no, it's fantastic, definitely.
Oh, Levi hit us with a good question here. Really quick, does your shoeing approach change with high suspensory versus low suspensory? So what he's talking about, folks, is he's talking about the branches of the suspensory from where it ties to the sesamoids to the pastern would be considered low, and from the sesamoids to the knee or hock would be considered high.
Yeah, so you've got the top of the suspensory, you've got the body of the suspensory, and then you've got the branches of the suspensory. Now, it's a good question because there's actually very limited research on suspensory branch injuries and how they actually occur. So
kind of leads you to believe there's not a lot of them.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, even not a lot, or just people just a bit just don't know how the pathogenesis is. They just don't know how it's happening. I think for me, I think if we have sometimes the branch things, because we've talked about dorsopalmar balance, we've talked about the descent of the fetlock, and we've talked about the tip of the toe. But if you imagine also that the tip of your toe can happen differently mediolaterally as well. Okay, so if your toe tips in and to one side, then that's going to pull more on one suspensory branch. So I have actually had one polo horse who kept on damaging the same suspensory branch. And when we watched him work on the soft, when his foot sunk in, it didn't sink in. It didn't just the toe didn't sink in, but he sunk in asymmetrically at the toe. So it was pulling on one particular branch. So what we did is we actually created a wide toe, but only on one side to like the second nail hole on that side. So it stopped that side of the toe sinking in. So, but there's limited research on it. But that's just a hypothesis from my point of view that could be asymmetrical toe sinking. Could be what's affecting, and just medial lateral balance as well for the branches. So hopefully that answers that question.
I would agree with that. And for the trimming to be out of balance medial lateral, it would have to be pretty grossly out of balance and not just a little bit. One thing you could do on that, though, Yogi, is just widen that branch of the shoe underneath the branch of the injury. But now, just like I was talking about before, it's like, what are the effects going to be from that? Like, I would just think you want that horse being flat. So whatever you got to do to recover a branch injury, you just don't want him dropping or sinking like Yogi was explaining there.
Yeah, well, the problem is that the horse was sinking. The horse was sinking lateral. Was it a medial toe? So if I extended, excuse me, so I extended the whole branch, then we could have ended up with a situation where it sank asymmetrically mediolaterally. So the only part of the foot that I wanted to float or keep or to decrease the pressure was the medial toe. So I had to be specific with widening the medial toe. If I'd widened the whole branch, then you're going to have other problems because now the whole of the other side is going to sink in. So you have to be quite specific with that.
So if you could take this anything away from all of what we've said, Levi, you have to be careful when you're making these major changes because it's going to have a direct effect another part in the foot. So when you're talking about does the shoeing approach change much? I would have to say no for the branches because from what I've found in research is that no, the shoeing changes don't differ much in the advised treatment. But like I said, like Yogi said, if you widen that branch, you're going to make the other side sink in more. But so what that also means is now you've got compression happening too. So on the side that you're floating, right? Because that's going up higher and the other side sinking in. So you start making big changes, take home message, you better know what you're doing.
And the other take home message to add to that is know when to stop. Right. So when do you stop putting the suspensory shoe on? Because that's one thing is like very often at polo, this actually is good that we're on this slide because this particular horse that finished the season in these suspensory shoes, we started the next season and the grooms were like, oh, don't forget that one's in suspensory shoes. And I was like, well, buddy, that was 7 months ago. Like since then it's been barefoot and in a paddock and resting. If I put a suspensory shoe on default, then I could end up creating other problems. So it's also knowing when to stop. The amount of times I come back to, I get a second opinion referral, and the horse is in any kind of package, and I say, "Why is it in this package?" Oh, because it had this injury 5 years ago. It's been in the same package for 5 years. Yeah. Has no one thought about the unintended consequences of that package and how that's now affecting the horse? So it's very important to know when to stop as well.
Yeah, I have the exact same situation on another cutting horse where the vet wanted a suspensory shoe and everything's going great except for till the horse is sore one day. And it's because his heels have completely collapsed and he has heel pain now. So then I change that and then get the horse sound. And then the vet ends up seeing the horse and they jerked the horse away from us because he wasn't in a suspensory shoe anymore. And it's just a huge chaos.
Yeah.
But anyways, know the effects. All right. So we're getting a lot of comments right here. And if you don't know how to subscribe, Laszlo, you just go to whichever one of our pages or both that you want to follow. I suggest both. Just go to them and there'll be a big subscribe button right on there. Or I know on mine, probably on Yogi's, but any post that I make, it's the top comment pinned that want to subscribe, click here. Megan, you're welcome. Catherine, have we talked about deep digital flexor tendons? No, we haven't, but that'd be a great topic for another day. And
yeah, we can certainly add that to the list.
Yeah. And Alan, thank you for being on here. Sarah, you're right. Things can go backwards. That's exactly what we're talking about. So, Cash, you're welcome. Glad you made it. Also, Sebastian Herrera, you are awesome. She said, they said, I thank you both for the great information and God bless America. That is how I end every single one. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yogi, you got anything else?
I don't think so, buddy. I think we've pretty much covered it.
All
so,
right. Well,
yeah, I'm happy with that.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. And I say, God bless America. And then Yogi debunks me by saying, God bless everybody. And then it makes me wonder if I should change my saying. But anyway, God bless.
God bless everybody.